In 1974, a senior NASA engineer who helped build the Saturn V, the most powerful rocket ever flown, published a book admitting he had been completely, humiliatingly wrong. He had set out to spend a few quiet weeks disproving one passage of the Bible, certain that 3,000 years of mystics had simply dressed up thunderstorms and dreams in religious language. Instead, the text beat him, line by line. And years later, the same engineer filed a United States patent inspired by the very verses he had tried to destroy. His name was Josef Blumrich. Born in 1913 inches Steyr, Austria, he became one of the quiet architects of the American space program. By the 1960s, he was chief of the systems layout branch at NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center. He helped design the Saturn V, the most powerful rocket ever flown, and later the Skylab station that orbited the Earth. When Blumrich looked at a flying machine, he didn't see magic. He saw load paths, structures, and stress. He saw whether a thing could actually leave the ground. This was not a man inclined toward mysticism. He held patents. He reviewed papers for technical journals. His entire career rested on a single ruthless question. Does the engineering hold up, or doesn't it? You could not impress Blumrich with poetry. You could only impress him with numbers that survived a second look, and then a third. So when a wildly popular book began claiming that the Bible secretly described alien spaceships, he reacted the way most serious engineers did at the time. He rolled his eyes. The book was Erich von Däniken's Chariots of the Gods. It argued that ancient scriptures weren't visions of God at all, they were confused eyewitness reports of extraterrestrial visitors. And one passage sat at the center of the claim. The opening chapter of the book of Ezekiel, where a Hebrew priest in exile describes a roaring, gleaming thing descending out of the sky. To von Däniken, that was a spacecraft. To Blumrich, that was lazy thinking dressed up as discovery. So he made a decision he assumed would be simple. He would apply real aerospace engineering to Ezekiel's text and show, line by line, that no functioning machine could ever match the description. He'd expose the whole ancient astronaut craze as fantasy, publish a tidy rebuttal, and move on with his life. He was that confident. This was a NASA engineer taking aim at a 3,000-year-old poem written by a frightened man beside a canal. There was no version of this contest where the poem won. He sharpened his pencils and opened the text. Except that's not how it went. First, the text itself. Ezekiel was a priest deported to Babylon around 593 BC, living among the exiles by a canal called the River Chebar. He wasn't writing science fiction. He was recording, in the careful detail of a shaken man, something he swore he had seen with his own eyes. A storm wind out of the north. A vast cloud. Fire flashing back and forth inside it. And at the very center, a glow like glowing metal, what older translations call amber or burnished bronze. Then come the strange specifics. 4 living creatures, each with wheels beside them. And the wheels are the part that haunted readers for centuries. A wheel within a wheel, able to move in any direction without turning as they went. Their rims were tall and terrifying, described as full of eyes. Above the whole structure, a gleaming dome. A firmament shining like ice. Generations read all of this as pure symbolism. Blumrich made a different choice. He decided to read it as a witness statement and to fact-check it. His method was deliberately cold. He pulled 6 different translations of Ezekiel and lined them up, hunting for the most concrete, physical descriptions, not the metaphors, but the nouns, shapes, materials, motions. He treated the prophet the way you'd treat an aircraft mechanic describing a crash he survived, maybe shaken, maybe imprecise, but reporting a real object that genuinely existed. Then he asked the only question that mattered to him. If you actually tried to build this thing, would the physics allow it to fly? And here he expected the whole thing to collapse instantly. Ancient myths are full of impossible flight chariots of fire, winged horses, gods riding the clouds. None of it survives contact with engineering. He assumed Ezekiel's vision would be the same, beautiful, evocative, and aerodynamically absurd. A few honest calculations, he thought, and the contradictions would pile up so fast the spacecraft idea would be dead on the page. So he started, the way any designer would, from the bottom of the machine with the legs. Ezekiel describes the creature's feet as straight, gleaming like burnished bronze, and shaped like the sole of a calf's foot round. To an ancient reader, that's odd poetry. To Blumrich, it read like landing gear. Straight, rigid legs, ending in round, dish-shaped footpads. Exactly what you designed to set a heavy craft down on uneven ground without it sinking. He had seen pads like that on lunar lander studies. The detail wasn't mystical. It was suspiciously, uncomfortably practical. And it was only the beginning. Then he reached the wheels, and this is where it gets genuinely strange. A wheel within a wheel, moving in any of four directions without rotating the body. For thousands of years, that line was treated as poetic nonsense. Wheels simply don't work that way. Except Blumrich, sitting at his NASA desk, realized it was a precise description of a problem he understood intimately. How do you make something heavy roll in every direction across rough terrain without having to stop and steer the whole machine? Because a normal wheel only goes one way. To turn, you have to steer the entire vehicle. But a wheel built with smaller rollers set around its rim, a wheel within a wheel can slide sideways even while it spins forward. It can travel in any direction without the body ever pivoting. That is exactly what Ezekiel wrote. And it is absolutely not how anyone in 593 BC imagined wheels. It's how a modern engineer would solve a very modern problem. Blumrich kept waiting for the contradiction. It didn't come. He moved up to the body of the craft and reconstructed, from the text, a coherent shape, a quasi-conical main hull, roughly 18 meters across at the base, capped by that gleaming dome Ezekiel called a firmament. A control cabin sat up top. The proportions weren't random or convenient. They were the proportions of a real re-entry body, something deliberately built to survive the heat and force of coming down through an atmosphere at speed. Detail after detail, it kept holding. And the four living creatures with their outstretched wings? Blumrich read them as four helicopter-like rotor units, each with blades around 11 meters long, folding down from the main body for vertical takeoff and landing. The noise of their wings, Ezekiel says, was like the roar of rushing waters. Anyone who has stood near a helicopter knows that exact sound. The prophet wasn't reaching for metaphor. He was reaching for the only words a Bronze Age man had for rotor wash. And that's not even the strangest part. Piece by piece, the thing he set out to demolish was assembling itself into a working machine on his drafting table. Landing legs, omnidirectional wheels, a conical capsule, rotors for descent, a command module above. Each detail he checked didn't merely survive, it fit the others, the way real engineering subsystems are forced to fit. And here's the part that unsettled him most. The design was internally self-consistent. You can fake one clever detail. You cannot accidentally fake an entire functioning vehicle. He ran the configuration as a feasibility study, the same way he'd evaluate any NASA proposal that crossed his desk. Could this craft launch from a mothership in orbit, enter the atmosphere, hover, and land on rough ground? By his own analysis, yes. The mass, the rotors, the structure, it all closed. The man who came to prove that Ezekiel's vision could never fly had just sketched a version of it that, on paper, could. His own discipline had turned against his own thesis. Somewhere in that process, Blumrich understood that he had lost. Not lost an argument with von Däniken, he never fully embraced von Däniken's broader, wilder claims. He had lost to the text itself. Every single time he expected Ezekiel to fail an engineering test, Ezekiel passed it. The prophet's impossible object kept behaving like a buildable one. For a man whose entire identity was rigor, that was either a coincidence stacked impossibly high, or it was something he genuinely could not explain away. And he didn't bury the result. He published it. In 1974, Bantam Books released The Spaceships of Ezekiel, and in it, Blumrich wrote one of the most honest lines an expert has ever put into a debunking. He admitted he had begun completely convinced the task would be easy, and then he confessed, in print, "Seldom have I felt as delighted, satisfied, and fascinated by being proven wrong." A senior NASA engineer, on the record, thanking an ancient scripture for defeating him. Now, let's be honest about what this is and what it isn't. Blumrick did not prove that aliens visited Babylon. He proved something narrower and stranger. That a trained spacecraft designer, reading the text as literally as he possibly could, was unable to make the description fail. That is not the same thing as truth. And critics pound some of their objections land hard. This is the point where the story stops being a clean triumph and becomes a genuine, unresolved debate. Skeptics like Ronald Story argued that Blumrick had it backwards, that he had quietly bent the translations to fit the machine he already wanted to find, then buried the stretch under charts and technical jargon. Give an engineer enough freedom to interpret poetic language, they said, and he can reverse engineer a spaceship out of almost anything. Mainstream scholars classify the book as pseudoscience, and that critique is fair. A self-consistent design is not proof. It is a haunting possibility, and nothing more. But here is the decision I promised you at the start, the one that makes this story impossible to fully dismiss. Blumrick was so convinced by Ezekiel's wheel within a wheel that he didn't just write about it. He engineered it. He designed a real omnidirectional wheel, one that rolls in any direction without turning, and the United States Patent Office granted it. That design, born from a passage he set out to destroy, still moves machines across factory floors today. The skeptic didn't just lose his case, he patented the evidence. What do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this, smash that like button. See you in the next video.